Good afternoon and most welcome to H994. And I will today talk about how you in your personal life can stick to the strange attractor and make yourself anti-fragile and invincible, unbeatable. I've been doing 24 to 33 verses repetitively for the last 4 years. At the very outset I did them outwards, but then I learned to do it internally, and by doing it internally and establish them, I noticed something happen with my sharpness of mind. If I was thinking or doing something at the same time, I used the strange attractor. It was a sharpness on the mind that came on. It was also a calmness. My body became more balanced and it became stronger, more directed. So I added to this the Yang movement of Tai Chi. That's the government regulated Yang form. It's the most practiced variety and made by the communist government in China. On top of that, I added 24 letters as well, taken from a very complicated alphabet. And it seems the more complexity you can add into the strange attractor, the more forceful it will become. This is because you get more fractality. If you get more fractality, the magnetic effect, so to speak, of the attractor will be stronger. For instance, the attractor in the Milky Way is strong enough to even move whole solar systems. So it becomes stronger the more difference you have within the system. And now when it's going better and better, I can sort of keep the ball moving all the time. I can put it into a situation with disturbances. I started out with the easiest one, and that was long haul drives when you almost get too relaxed, and I managed to put it in there as long as it wasn't complicated. Later I could have done it when it was complicated as well, and I added complexity more and more. And yesterday was the first time I did it completely when I was recording lectures. You can see those episodes in 989, 990 and 991. And I'm a bit monotonous, at least in the very first lecture. That has to do that I try to keep my eyes on both the ball of the internal attention and the outwardly projected speech or lecture I was having at the same time. And I noted it got at some instant more monotonous, less participating, but that will happen in the beginning, and that will cease to be the case. Once you get it established, you can do loads of things at the same time. And I would say this is one of the games with fractality. You learn to understand that you can do many things at the same time. One thing doesn't necessarily have to exclude another thing. Actually, the more I've been going on with this, the more I understand that obstacles, disturbances, molestations and adversities actually are very complex fractalities. Or instead of naming these people and naming these things obstacles, I just try to name them complexities. And all of a sudden I noticed I can take use of it. Think once more of the Milky Way. It doesn't matter if there is a star coming in headway, it will still help the chaotic system. Everything that comes into the chaotic system will make it stronger, as long as the chaotic system is strong enough to handle it. So that is the reason you need to do it little by little. You need to be sure that your system can handle it, but when you're sure, you should actually add obstacles, problems and so forth. This is the only thing that can make the system stronger, because it thrives on complexities and it dies out of sameness. I will get back to sameness later on here, but remember this: difference, disturbance are similar to complexities. Something being different from yourself will make the read-off much greater. If it's similar to yourself, the read-off will be less. And I also noticed if I changed, for instance, the lettering, I have let's see, 26 letters, I also repeat. If I change the color of each letter, I add another sense to the whole thing. Color is not part of my learning scheme, and so far that is very complicated, but I would like to alternate between 6 different colors. I try to put that into the working process, trying to make the strange attractor more and more complicated. And of course you are more than welcome to add whatever complexities you want, like smell, taste. You can say the letter N tastes like chocolate, or the letter O has the sense of caviar, or the smell of caviar, or something like that. As the more the system gets its strength, the less need you will have for sameness. And this is something I've been thinking about for a while now. What is the reason for the metaphysics of presence, or logocentrism? And the idea was sparked in my imagination from the book of Rudolf Garcia, Taint of the Mirror. And he mentioned there, if you are at a certain level, you need to have sameness, because you can't really handle difference. So there is also a development basis to look at. But as soon as you're beginning to become more of this integrated, strong, chaotic system, you will also be able to accept more difference. Then you will be able to take it in, and then you can sort of make the system harder by taking in more and more difference. And this is something I've been thinking about when it comes to the localization. I have a feeling sometimes I don't want to take in what's around me, because I just want to be private, or I want to cut myself out from reality to have a piece of calm. But I realize more and more, if you sort of temper the system like you temper a piece of metal, make it harder by putting it into cold water, you can actually make it stronger. And one good start is to see everything coming from the outside as good things, something that could help you in your progress. Of course, don't go overhead. Don't do the Kierkegaardian throw yourself after a rock, which that is really bad advice. And it was bad advice for Kierkegaard himself as well, I'd say. No, take it a little by little, and you will notice when your system is more adaptable, and all of a sudden you can take an interest in a new subject that former hadn't caught your interest. It will feel very different, but after some time you will see that your system can handle it, and you can actually try to get interest in completely new things. And for every time you sort of expand your interest basis, you will gain both broadness, but this is interesting coming from fractality. You will also get more sharpness in the little finer details, because if you exclude yourself, you lose often the sharpness first, the very focus on the finer details. And I think I mentioned that before. Clockmakers, or what? Urmakare, what they call it in English?
Clockmakers, no.
No, they don't make clocks really. Well, the one who fix clocks, they are usually people who are very observant of their surroundings, so they can get into the finer details. For me, just looking into a clock makes me nausea. thinking of fixing those small little cogs within the watch is just scary to me. But once you take in a lot of your surrounding area, the more you will be able to project your finer details. And this was also shown in the book Chaos by Glick. Susie Frobel mentioned that as well, because it's the fractality that is the force, the élan vital, so to speak, behind directing into a specific point, being able to be sharp with that point, make specific incisions, and maybe producing comments that are exactly where they should go. And that is something that we don't think. We think, if I'm supposed to concentrate, I need to shut everything off, I need to get into this, and usually you put your this is how I thought clockmakers or clock fixer would look like. Actually, they are quite relaxed and not tensed at all, and they open up. By opening up, you can get into the smaller and finer details as well. So you win in both ends. You win on the universal, the general, but you also gain in the specific. So despite it looks like it's a contradiction going on here, it is just the opposite. They help each other. I think a little bit about the book of Ian McGilchrist, especially the first book, The Master and His Emissary, where he mentioned that the left hemisphere is the specific details and the right is the broader context. Maybe it could be that they help each other if we let them help each other, and they in concord give this synergetic effect that is so interesting. When you have two different directions, they could actually help each other, even though the direction seems to be going in different ways. Synergetic effects is very common within medicine. If you go to a pharmacy and you want to change a medicine, they sometimes will ask you, what sort of medicines are you taking? And that is because there are some medicine that can have very strong synergetic effect. That means that if you take two of them, the effect won't be the addition, it could be much more. It could be a multiplicity of effects.
Ni fina folk, ni kan inte erbjuda en cigg. Nej, ni är för fina och svaga.
No, if you start from differences, you will not reach sameness. And there's another very interesting connection there. If you start out looking for sameness, you will lose out on both difference and sameness. Whereas you start with difference, you don't look for sameness, you don't let that obstruct your openness to reality, you let everything that is different come in, you will also gain in the ability to sameness. Why is that? Well, the chaotic system is a force system and it has a certain direction. Look at the Milky Way, it's directed. Not only is it a spiral, it's also very clearly directed. It is this very direction that shows out sameness. Sameness is something that is done, it's a sort of action. And sameness, looking for sameness passively, will not give sameness. It will actually obstruct sameness. So you see once more, not only will you gain when you compare the little, the minute details to the bigger details, or the bigger concept, or the generalities, or the universals, you will also gain when it comes to this specific thing, and that is sameness will actually be strengthened by difference. Just the opposite as you would learn in, for instance, analytic philosophy, where it usually said that start with sameness and then you can sort of discern difference. No, it's just the opposite. There is also good and just reason to think about the whole system of thinking as a chaotic system. And that means that The strength of the thinking system equals the complexity you are willing to take in, or are rather able to take in. That's a better way of putting the point. If you're too fixed in your mental attitude, you won't be able to take in differences in the same grade. And by choosing preemptively or a priori what sort of material you should encounter, or what sort of circumstances you should encounter, or in what sort of areas you would be, you will already in a way that is almost random cut off reality into two halves, and you would lose out whatever you do, because you don't know if it is sameness you encounter. You don't know what you will encounter preemptively. So that could actually construct lack of things, lack of ability of space and time, something that Susie Froebel showed. If you decide preemptively what time is, for instance, divide it in an objective time and a subjective time, that is already constructing an obstacle to the complexities that are there, because those two things, those two polarities, actually takes sameness as a starting point. Because to have a difference in that way, you start out with sameness, and then you say subjective time is not the same thing as objective time, and vice versa. The more you repeat this, the more you will also sense you can do it in a different strength. Now in the afternoon, it's past 6, I feel tired, so I can't produce my internal sound very clearly. And that goes to show it is different during the day, and depending on how much you have earlier sort of exhausted your abilities. But be not alarmed. Tomorrow your abilities will return with double the strength. So be sure to every day sort of waste or exhaust all your capital. And it's especially the last 5% that are extra important. This is something I learned when I was still training karate, for instance. The Japanese tradition is to train as hard as when you are as most tired, because this is when the strange attractor sticks, because then there is no resistance, and it becomes so automatic that you can take in more things and thereby making it stronger directly. It's actually something I learned in the military, and in Swedish is called överinlärning, and you did it in the military by repeating things incessantly, especially when you are almost exhausted, as when we did the soldier test, where we have to be up for 48 hours. And there we had to repeat, mounting the gun, putting the ammunition, do the different movements again and again and again, until you almost throw up from boredom. But that stuck after that, and that made a sort of a strange attractor. What I'm trying to do now is much more sort of an internal thing, and it seems to be the case, by internalizing bodily movement, you can make bodily movement even stronger, much stronger than you would be able to do if you only were to do it on the outside, to speak. This is something we learned within the science of sport. That people who can sort of project movements before they do it, if you want to jump as high as you can you really see it for yourself, what movements you do? That will have a very significant effect on the actual performance. Actually, they don't seem to be that different. And of course, this also has connection to the aforementioned pretension and retention and similar things. Those are all to do with the directedness. As I mentioned in the earlier, think about the serpent. It has a one unitary movement. It goes all in the same direction. How it moves, where it's headed, its telos, its objective, and its senses. They are all directed, and you only get as much sensory material as you send out, as you direct, as an absolute equivalence. And if you don't send out much, as we don't do in Western culture, since the pre-Socratic, you don't receive much. And this is sort of a reality that is faded. It's not as real. And as Ian McGilchrist suggests in his book, The Matter of Things, that could be the actual cause for these people looking for something more real, looking for the ideal forms somewhere else. But I have the feeling, and so has a lot of people, that they know that not even their dreams are especially vivid. They didn't have much reality to them. And that's an interesting factor. Once your thinking is not that fractal, what you imagine won't be that strong. And this is something I read in a book by Heidegger, the constructor of modern yoga. Iyengar wrote that a Westerner can't even imagine heaven as a yoga trainer can. And that has to do that our imagination becomes weak. So therefore we can't even imagine paradise. It's going to be some bleak place that is usually infused with sameness and boredom. And I think maybe what most people think about paradise today is much more like Hades in the Greek tradition. Some place where nothing happens really, and we, in our ability to imagine, can't even imagine good things anymore. And of course that affects your direction. Think about the snake. It's very anxious to catch the mice. It really flies over the sand. I've seen it myself and it's amazing. It's so quick. I could never ever outrun even a common Swedish adder. But think about normal human beings. They cannot make a lot of pretension. They cannot do retention. They cannot go into the depths of their own history. They cannot take out that material. I mentioned it before. People coming from the Amazonas basin, they are incredibly good in remembering that past, because they see the past as something active, not something stillborn, dead, grey like Hades. And they're also incredibly good when it comes to pretension. Their imagination are much higher, more positive, much colorful. And that means that we can't even imagine good things anymore. We get lazy in our thinking. And in the end, that will also affect our intention, our motivation. So we don't have any clear goals, and we don't have anything to sort of put our foot down and wanting to strive for. The old motivation is gone, since the fantasy is gone. And I remember here a research made by this Ben Ariely, when they really went into depth what people were feeling or thinking about paradise in Israel. And most people couldn't even imagine something good and nice. They just refer to it, not being able to have any colors, taste to it, no honey and milk and wine, nothing of fantastic colors, flavors, smells, warmth, tactile feelings that are pleasurable. They couldn't imagine anything. So not even a paradise is possible for modern man. And of course, if we can't imagine something nice in our lives, how could we strive for it? Of course we cannot. Iyengar had a point. What we have been losing out on is thinking. Our thinking has become, just as Heidegger said, it has become denken with a little d. It is no longer thankful, danken. Heidegger sees see this thing as etymologically connected, denken and danken, that thinking used to be something glorious, something thankful, something fantastic, something that really strived you and made your life fantastic, wonderful, illustrious. But now when you ask people to imagine paradise, they won't give such a bleak replica of paradise. A paradise that looked like DDR, the German East Republic, grey and horrid and boring and repetitive. And that also means they will end up in such a place, because what you imagine is also the place you will end up. And that is clearly shown by the serpent. The serpent will only be as effective in his perception, in his or her imagination, as he is directed, intended. And a serpent that doesn't intend the mouse won't catch the mouse. A person who doesn't intend paradise won't catch paradise, will never get to that person. Instead, he will end up in this other area, the bleak DDR, more like Hades or Karl-Marx-Stadt. If you've ever been to Karl-Marx-Stadt, that is what most people think of paradise. I have no idea what they think about hell, but that is the modern take on paradise. So this fixation of ours, this wanting to go into sameness, is a self-made prison in some way. In some way it's coming from the educational system, but it's also established long before we even start to talk. My idea is this separation between the senses, the 5 or the 7th, depending on you who count, that could actually be well established by your very own birth somehow. And I'm pretty sure that it will strengthen the first years of your living time, because we get so affected fractally by our surrounding environment, so we take in every little detail, and that is our reality after that. But the message from fractality and chaos theory is something immensely positive. It means by opening up to difference and understanding complexity as always being potentially good, in good doses, that is, quantum satis, don't forget that. As long as they follow the Swedish expression of lagom, and you don't go overboard, it will be beneficial to your system. It will make it stronger, and your balancing system in your body is closely connected to your imagination, and your directedness is close to the both. So you can think that about like a trinitary, that the three things that help each other to get stronger. And although this sameness fixation on a very abstract plane is very easy to avoid, it will dissolve even better when we understand it by our bodies, when we stop looking for sameness in our body. And I think that's a very specific thing that could be a great obstruction, and that is a lot of it is a very modern construct, and it's that you think yourself as being this bodily incarnate before you even exist. And this is the mirror image of Rodolphe Gasquet. You think the thing that looks into the mirror is more real than the thing that sort of reflects. And that makes the illusion that you are a piece of flesh, a chunk of flesh. And before even anything happened, you in a clumsy way try to cut out a piece of everything, of the totality of existence, and say, this is the place for my body. And that will immediately lead to that you sort of cramp yourself, that you become less, you expand less, you become less widened, less balanced, less present, less in the now. And this is a very interesting oddity. The construct of the body is quite modern. Think of it before modern anatomy, we didn't think of ourselves as being fleshy bodies. First thing, we didn't look so much into mirrors. It wasn't a general concept that we were made of bones, for instance, something that is disastrous when it comes to posture. The very idea that you are like a building and the building blocks of your body are the bones, which is not true. The building blocks of your body is your whole body, including everything, and also your imagination of your body. They are all together, and especially the bony structure, it is something that was constructed at the same time as the muscular system, as the neurological system, as the sinew system, and all other systems in the body. It's not a separate thing. It could be a separate thing when you look at a building, but don't think of your body as a building. And I think that conception actually weakens us. And I feel I strengthen my balance when I take in everything, because that is like an antidote to this very, very strong idea of being a fleshy body of some sort, and that I need to cut out the negative space and just keep the good things. And by doing so before the fact, I do an unjust division that makes myself smaller. Because remember the body map from the Couples-Blakesley, they show that your body image, your idea of your body, is as strong as your body is actually. So you can strengthen your body just to think of your body as stronger, more balanced, more directed. All those thinking will have a direct effect on how you are poised. This is quite marvelous. And this is an interesting thing that people usually think to be, wow, that just belongs to the body sphere, or that's a medical thing, or it could be good sometimes to think about it when you do training. No, this actually affects everything. Also, that's something the Couples-Blakesley showed. People who are more balanced are much sharper intellectually. They can make divisions, minute separations that normal people can't do. Think about the exquisite, very precise reading of Jacques Derrida. It could only be done by a person who's very much into his body, who's very self-aware, who doesn't have this horrid slouchy position of, what's the name, Searle. Something that he exposes in Limited Incorporated, and he shows that it doesn't have to be that for Searle either. He can open up. And by opening up, he would make his own vantage point even stronger. It's like reaching out and, see, I can give you a hand here. I'm not a threat to you. But Searle, he insisted on Derrida being a threat to himself and his integrity. I don't think that to be the case. Of course, a little by little, you don't want to meet a lunatic one night until you're strong enough to handle that. By little, you can also learn how to sort of not get diluted or attenuated by criticism. Of course, we are always on the edge at times, we are very weak, but when we are stronger, we can try to expose ourselves to that difference, that some sort of mild antagonism can actually be. And you will notice that that could actually be helpful and make your immune system to other views stronger. And it doesn't mean that you give up any of what is you. You don't give up your directedness. And look at animals, they can cooperate and still be individuals. So one thing doesn't exclude the other one. I would say they actually help each other. Just in the same way as I was mentioning before, the specific and the general do help each other. It helps the general to become even more general, and it helps the specific to become even more specific. And I think this could possibly be the first seed of a solution to the conundrum that Ian McGilchrist finds himself in nowadays, being a bit pessimistic about the future of humanity, since it doesn't look, to be honest, that the right hemisphere for some reason will gain force. But this can show that the left hemisphere doesn't have to give up anything. It can actually be strengthened by the right hemisphere. And I think it could be a much better solution to the problem. Instead of seeing them as antagonism, they can reach out to each other. Generalities can show the specificity to become even stronger, and vice versa. And by acknowledging both sides in both nodes in our reality, north and south, we don't make anything weaker. Actually, we become wider and more lengthening, more in the world, and oddly enough, our internal world also gets some benefit from this. I already noticed that there is a certain crampedness to everyday thinking. This looking for sameness that we all suffer from make for like friction in the thinking. The thoughts are very hard to produce. Sometimes I really need to put my effort to it, and what comes out are sometimes it feels like too hard chasing. Too hard chasing becomes maybe constructed or artificial in some way. But once I open up, words come easier to me. It's like picking them from a mental sphere. It is not as stern, and I can tell the difference now. It's happening now in this instance. And think about the two spheres, the outer sphere, the exogenous sphere, and the endogenous sphere. Maybe they are actually helping each other. So the more endogenous you become, the more exogenous you can become at the same time. That there is sort of a Kleinbottlian connection there. And it could be an opening up also to the inside. And that your memories, your personal, I think we often see as your personal memories as a luggage in modern time, and you should just get rid of it. By personalizing everything, you also make it more objective in a way, because then you have complexities enough to actually trying to get into it. Don't do the mistake of Bertrand Russell, often mentioning him, but he tried to be more and more objective, and that led to he lost himself, but he also lost his audience, because you lose out on your possibility of reaching out, having the nice direction as a serpent or a turtle or a flying manta has. They are all dependent on one unison direction, and that unison direction are dependent on all the direction being opened up to. So we can have one direction as we have a gazillion of them. And that's also an amazing feature of fractality as such. And this is an excellent point to terminate this lecture. I say thank you very much, and I wish you a very pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.